Okay, we'd like to get started for the 4 o'clock address. I'm laughing because I went to get a term paper for a student and I'm still holding it. Alice, I have your paper. Okay, the many hats we wear here. Many of you were here for the earlier two events, and welcome back. This is the Maxwell School celebration of International Women's Day. I'd like to again thank the staff of the International Relations Program and the ICT staff for everything they did to make this day possible. Also, this event is being taped, so you will be able to link to the presentation today from our website or from the Maxwell School's YouTube channel. So if you'd like to see any of the events of the day. We had an event at 12 o'clock today that was very interesting with Sasha Hart talking about the equality effects, constitutional case in Kenya, and strategies in collaborations with NGOs and Kenyan attorneys and Kenyan police officials. It was a very interesting day. We followed with a panel of alum who illuminated some of the challenges and rewards of working in the field. And again, that's available for you to view if you missed that very interesting and timely panel. Now we're going to have the keynote address for the day. And I've asked a friend and supporter of International Women's Day, Professor Yüksel Serzgin, to introduce our speaker today. Yüksel is an assistant professor of comparative politics and law here at the Maxwell School, and I'd like to welcome him to the podium.
It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today. The International Relations Program has put a lot of effort into organizing this wonderful event today to mark and celebrate International Women's Day. From Middle East to North Africa, from North Africa to Latin America or North America, wherever you look at today, you would see that women's rights issues lie at the very heart of both domestic and international policy debates. In this regard, being at this policy school, as a member of faculty here, I greatly appreciate and thank the International Relations Program, and particularly Professor Lovely, in taking the lead to raise awareness of women's rights across the campus, also at the school. So this is itself, this whole program, starting with the morning and ending with our good friend and esteemed colleague, Hawa Ibrahim, itself is a great achievement as a program. So I would like to again thank everyone, those involved. With that, please allow me to introduce our esteemed guest and my very dear friend, Hawa Ibrahim. Hawa has a very long, impressive bio. If I try to really share every achievement in her life with you, it will take me at least a couple hours. So with that, please let me just highlight some of the brief highlights from her bio. Hawa Ibrahim is a human rights lawyer from Abuja, Nigeria, and a mother of two handsome boys. She was born in a small, impoverished village as the daughter of a mullah, an Islamic cleric. She was supposed to be married off at the age of 12, but Hawa refused that destiny written for her. Instead, she went on to study law and became the first female lawyer from her part of the country in Nigeria. Hawa first served as a prosecutor in Nigeria, and later with the introduction of Sharia law, Sharia criminal law, in 12 northern states of Nigeria in early 2000s. She became an internationally renowned human and women's rights advocate and a lawyer. She, with her teams, has won numerous precedent-setting cases before the Sharia courts in Nigeria. Hawa has built up what can only be described as an extraordinary practice, defending people who are condemned under Islamic Sharia law, which has been again applied in 12 northern states of Nigeria. Nigeria has a federal system where there are 36 states, but only 12 of those do apply Islamic criminal law. Death sentences, although not carried out for the moment, continue to be handed down by Sharia courts. Since 2000, Hawa has worked pro bono as a defense counsel in over 100 cases, many of which have involved women accused of adultery and subjected to death by stoning, and many children sentenced to have limbs amputated. Besides her legal career, Hawa has been a research fellow and a visiting professor at many fine universities in Europe and United States, including Harvard and Yale. She was awarded Sakharov Prize by the European Parliament, and she received Cavaliere Award, the highest human rights award by the Italian government. She has been also awarded several honorary doctorate degrees by European and American universities. Hawa is also the author of a very moving and influential book titled Practicing Sharia Law, 7 Strategies for Achieving Justice in Sharia Courts, which provides unique real-world insights into intricacies of Sharia law in Nigeria. The book was published by the American Bar Association, and thousands of copies of the book have been distributed across Nigeria to judges, lawyers, activists, and scholars. Without further ado, please join me welcoming my good friend and our esteemed guest, Hawa Ibrahim. It's good to see you
here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Yüksel, for that generous introduction. Can you hear me? Okay. When I was driving in from the airport, I noticed how very clean the city is and so beautiful, and I was really like, oh my goodness. And then I walked in, and later I was being introduced by Norman to the school, and something struck me when she said alumni were the ones that are sort of very active this afternoon in the panel. So I'm so grateful and honored to be here and to be with you. I want to say thank you to Yüksel. When we were at Harvard during our moment together, he was the go-to person when it comes to computer. Maybe you have discovered that by now. And for me, he was a critic in a way, and the book I wrote, he had pleasure in looking at part of it, and was very, very helpful. I call him the breath of fresh air. You know him, he's a fresh air around you. I want to thank Dina for helping me out with emails and making me to just sit up and be on schedule. I want to thank the Maxwell School. I want to thank Mary and Noma for the introduction in the school today. I also want to thank the organizers. I know there are a lot of students that have participated here and non-students that have put in so much effort. Thank you so much for making this a reality. I want to thank women, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, everywhere. And we are representative of this woman, so I want to thank them by extension. But more importantly, I want to say thank you to each of you that is sitting here. Some of you, it has been a long day. And when I walked in, I saw how intense it was. And some of you stick to it to the end. It is an honor to me, and I'm truly very grateful. And I believe also an honor to the cause we all believe in: women, justice, and human rights. So I want to start by a few disclaimers, and then I will try to address my topic, which is women and Sharia. But before I do that, let me say that I became educated by accident, and I became a lawyer by accident, and I went to teach at Harvard by accident. So I had too many accidents in my life, so just be careful. Now, English is my 5th language, and I never learned English in the classroom. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, it won't embarrass me. Just wave at me. I will repeat, because we need to communicate. So please feel free to interrupt at any moment, and I'm happy to repeat myself so that we could understand each other. But most importantly, I'm not an Islamic scholar. I am just a lawyer. And so what I'm going to speak to you today, has no Islamic rooted, I was born and raised a Muslim, but that is my credential. And I learned on the spot the job that I was doing. Yüksel said that for 8 years I was a prosecutor, which was my first discipline. Actually, my first discipline was a teacher in the elementary school. And then when I went to read law, I was a prosecutor for 8 years. When I left prosecution, I did silly things. And one of them was that I decided to open a legal firm in my state of Bauchi, where there has been never a woman that has had a legal firm. So nobody believed in me and believed in what I was doing. For 2 years, I had no client. So I would look at the ceiling and read the newspapers. And subsequently, I thought, okay, why not be creative? This is International Women's Day, so we are talking about how do we inspire change. And I will speak a bit about being creative. So I started what I call the Women's and Children's Clinic, legal clinic. And subsequently, soon after, the United Nations Development Project asked me to do something about widowhood and the practices of widowhood and how it affects children in 19 northern states. And that was my eye-opening to the fact that, yes, I was, but you know what? By the time I interacted more, I felt that there is so much we can give and we can also take. But let me say something about the panel this afternoon. When I had the panel, I'm so glad I came, Mary. I left my house at 3 a.m., so if I sleep on you, remember. And then when I came in and Yüksel called, I was trying to pull myself on the bed. I said, let me just take 5 minutes. But then Dina called, and I said, let me just get going. And I'm so glad I came. The first panel spoke to me. And if only the panel have finished whatever they were saying and we all go, I think we have gained so much trying to celebrate this International Women's Day of 2014. Anna spoke about education in Africa. And the question that the lady asked was really very fascinating. And I was intrigued by all the answers. But I am one of those children that was hawking. I don't know if you know what is hawking. It's Hauking. For some of you that have been to some part of my world, exactly. We take our things on our head and we go from house to house to hawk it, to sell it. So I was a hawker. And I started at the age of 4. And I went to the mountain to make woods to come down to sell. That was my life. And somehow, we can talk about in Q&A, I escaped and I am here. And I never take any day for granted. Every single moment I have, I do not take for granted. And I hope if there's any message I will leave for you here, do not take anything for granted. You have so much. This country is a blessed country and has blessed all of us. So don't take anything for granted, okay? So let me say some few things about my country. I told you a bit about my practice. My country will tie into the Sharia and then the strategies, and I will end up with, I love to tell stories. I live my work. So even though I have the past few years been teaching, visiting professor, I lived what I say. So a lot of these questions, I think you have very, very good questions, especially the question from all of you, especially the students. I thought if we would just leave so much time at the end, let me not tell you. I want to hear from you what you want me to say. So let it be that way in interaction. So I will speak a little bit more briefly and just want you to just come in and just let us have a conversation. Nigeria has 170 million people. It is hugely diverse. It's a very beautiful country. Believe you me, if I come back, if God asks me to come back to this world and asks me which country I want to come back as a Nigerian. Because I believe that country is one of the most wonderful countries on earth, okay? I'm also privileged to be in this country, which is very great and powerful, but Nigeria is beautiful. We are hugely diverse. We have the South, which is mainly Christians, and we have the North, which is mainly Muslims. We have at least 4 legal systems in the country. So when I speak about Sharia, we will talk about a little bit of some of these challenges. Practicing within 4 legal systems. In the South, as of today, don't have Sharia. The North, we have Sharia. And even the North, we have 19 northern states, only 12 have Sharia. And we can talk a little bit about it. But what is Sharia? And what am I doing defending women sentenced to death by stoning? And I'll sort of say a little bit about it in terms of these cases I have worked on. And I wanted to mention here that Nigeria became independent in 1960. When we became independent, before independence in the 13th century, we had Islam in Kanem Borno. So Islam had been in the country even before the British came, and even before the independence. But after the independence and the British left us, what they did was we had a constitution, and the constitution was basically, it gave us a lot of leeways, but there was no criminal Sharia enshrined in the Nigerian constitution. In 1979, some of our leaders came to your beautiful country, United States of America, and they sort of tweaked your constitution and made it our own constitution. So if you look at Nigerian constitution, it's presidential. It's exactly something similar to the United States. And we have 3 arms of government, and the judiciary sort of is very active. But the Constitution of 1979, which subsequently became the Constitution of 1999 in Nigeria, had Sharia. So we always had Sharia. We had Sharia before the British came and colonized. We had Sharia after they left. We had Sharia during the military regimes of over 30 years of our history. What we had that was different in 1999 was that there was handing over of power, political power, from the military to the civilians. And one of the governors, when he was campaigning to be a governor, said, if you elect me to be the governor of Zamfara State, which is one state in the northwest, I will give you Sharia. So when he introduced Sharia in 1999, it was a campaign promise delivered. He delivered on his promise. But what did he do by introducing Sharia in 1999? We had what we had. We had Sharia under Section 277 Nigerian Constitution, but it has limitation in its jurisdiction. And it was limited to civil matters. So what he did in 1999 was to introduce 5 new offenses, among others. There are smaller ones, but the major ones was 5 new offenses. And then 5 new punishments. But if you look at the Penal Code of Northern Nigeria, which was before the introduction of Sharia, and the Sharia Penal Code of after 1999, when he introduced Sharia, 95% is exactly the same. So those 5 major offenses he introduced were, if you drink alcohol, you'll be flogged publicly 100. If you steal, you have your limbs amputated. If you commit adultery, which is called zina under the law, and you are not married, you'll be flogged 100. If you are married or have any semblance of marriage, even divorce, you'll be stoned to death. And apostasy was introduced, meaning you cannot change your religion from Islam to any other religion. And if you do so, you also be stoned to death. Then there is an offense called robbery, hiraba. And that is crucifixion, the punishment. So these are some of the major punishments, an eye for an eye that he introduced, a tooth for a tooth. So in 1999, I was approached by an NGO, and that is how I came into practicing of Sharia. Remember, I was a prosecutor for 8 years from 1996, from 1989 to 96, when I left the Ministry of Justice and I opened my chambers. And then in 1999, we had the Sharia. And I came in to help the first case of Sharia, which is the case of Maria. And subsequently, I've handled about 157 cases. I'm still going to court. I just came back from Nigeria some few weeks ago, and that is actually how I'll end my evening with. So I wanted you to see this bigger context of the picture of the Sharia. I have handled cases of women, children, and men. The cases are unique. Each case, we take them as unique as it is, and it's also as serious as it is. The offenses I mentioned to you, most of the cases I have been part of are cases of women sentenced to die by stoning. And I could give you an example in a moment. But let me mention strategies quickly, and I'll focus on 3 strategies. The strategy was the subject of my book, which Yuxel have just mentioned right now. And the 7 strategies are understand the dynamics of what you are doing. I know there are some students in this place. Understand the dynamics of your teachers, your lecturers, your professors, your courses. That's what we did as lawyers, understanding the dynamics. But above understanding the dynamics, how do you work within the dynamics? That is our strategy number 1. Understand the dynamics, work within the dynamics. Our strategy number 2 is how do you pay attention to details? We will come out of court, we will hear from one end, we are Yakuba in Benin Yahudawa, Jewish of Islam. But how do you pay attention to that detail but not join issues? Our strategy number 3 is how to stay focused. Some of you must have heard of the cases in CNN or BBC. You have medias all over the world. We've never seen media covering story like this, some of these cases. But how do you know as a lawyer that you have to stay focused on your own case? Your primary objective as a lawyer is duty to your client, not to what the press want to hear you say. So when they give us the microphone, what do you think about the West versus Islam? We don't know what is West versus Islam. What we know is that we have a woman sentenced to die by stoning, and we are trying to defend her right under Islamic Sharia. Oh, what do you think about clash of civilization? We don't know what is clash of civilization. So how do we stay focused? How do you become flexible and then firm? That is our strategy number 4. Become flexible and become firm. Some of you will know more what I'm talking about. Some of you will take classes. How do you become flexible in what you do? As lawyers, what we did was that there are some principles of laws that we don't negotiate. Supremacy of the law, separation of state and religion, fundamental human right of a person, a woman, you can go on. Well, when it comes to the people, the society, and I'll speak about it a little bit more, you have to be flexible. Our strategy number 5 is how do you make a plan? Now, some of you knows this much more than I'm saying, but let me tell you what we've done as lawyers. We always have, for me, I have 4 plans. I have plan A, B, C, and D. Now, plan A, as a prosecutor, I plan the case of the prosecutor before I plan my own defense. I don't know how you make your strategy. Before you go into board meeting, before you go into class, what was your strategy of trying to get what is for you that day? For me, it's to prepare the case of the prosecution. I was there before. And then I'll prepare my own defense. Strategy number 2 is, of course, preparing my defense. The strategy number 3 is, and I'll speak to this in the next few minutes, some of the judges, almost all our judges then, could not read or write in English. They only read and write in Hausa or Arabic. And the laws are in English. So how do you work with some of these difficulties? And I'm going to talk about the how-to in a minute. But that is how to be firm and flexible. Does that make sense to you? You be firm on issues of law, and you be flexible on issues that you find across your way as you move on. In our own case, the men were part of it, the women were part of it, the court system was part of it, the society was part of it. Our strategy number 6 is how do you know your law and know it? And today I had a lot of excellent questions. You know your subject. You know your stuff. Some of you might have known that when I entered the Sharia court the first time, I was not allowed to speak because I'm a woman. The Sharia court judges don't entertain women to speak before them. So I was passing notes. Some of you that have watched some of the documentary, there's 1 hour in CNN, there's 1 hour in BBC. It's called In the Name of Allah, the other one is the name of God. You will see me passing papers to the male lawyer. He's my junior, but I was passing papers to him. So what happened was that when they would come after the case and ask him, what do you think about this issue of law? He would say, go and ask Hawa. But you know your stuff. Nobody takes it away from you. For some of the students here, you know your stuff. You came here for a purpose. And I always say that friends may be a huge baggage you don't need. Your parents send you here for more important things. Know your stuff. Take it in. Savour it. This is your moment in this university. Don't take it for granted. For us, we decided to savour our own by knowing the law. So when you speak about the law, you speak it. And I recited Quran when I was small, so it's easy for me to cram, memorize laws. So I can speak about it just offhand. How do you know it? Know your stuff. It's very important. And lastly, the seventh strategy is how do you think global and act local. Thinking globally and acting locally. But let me spend time and just speak about three main strategies here that I've chosen out of the 7 I mentioned to you. Number 1 is understanding the dynamic, which I have introduced. The dynamic of the men, the dynamic of the court system, the dynamic of the society. There is a lot of argument about whether men are half a woman in Islam. Oh, you know, she inherits half of the property. How evidence in court is half of the man. She has no right to land. She cannot divorce him. It may not be true. And if there's something I want to say here about Islam and Sharia, is 3 things. 1 is that Islam came from the word salam. You've heard it many times. I just want to underscore it. And salam is shalom. And shalom is peace. So Islam is a religion of peace. If there are some few people that have decided to run away with something that is not peaceful, they're actually operating out of that realm of peace. Yeah, it is true. If you look at all the good books that we have, that there's a lot of conflicting issues about the position of women. Check any book or the famous religion, there's something about women. I've been able to read few of them. I've read the Bible from cover to cover, so also the Quran. So we have a lot of challenges in some of these things. But you know what? As we celebrate International Women's Day, it's for us to think about moving forward. And so I will speak about some of this moving forward within the context of the challenges of Sharia. So it is true that there are some hadith that mention that her evidence of a woman is half that of a man. Her intellect is not half. Inheritance can be contested depending on which jurisdiction you're talking about. Property and divorce, too, can be contested. There has been a lot of writing about it. But let me speak a little bit about the judges, about the law, which is a little bit different from what they used to practice. And my own personal experience within the courtroom is there is this feeling of there's ego that is flying. There's this big ego inside the room. And so when you have this big ego flying, at times it doesn't help in trying to address issues of justice and humanity. So there's a language issue which I mentioned to you. There is a complexity that comes to our humanity in some of their discuss in the courtroom. And I will give examples. I just want to mention this because I want to make sure I am on time. The society, we have to understand the core values of the society, and it's contextual. I had this afternoon panel speaking about the context of education in Africa, about the Colombian experience, about the lady that was talking about policy. Everything is contextual, okay? And let me say this, that in terms of contextuality, we should not devoid it from the core value of the society. Now, let me give you an example of Hajara. It's one of the cases of a woman sentenced to die by stoning. We went to the village. We had no judgment. Our first expression was that we know the society up to today in northern Nigeria, it is not right for a woman to be pregnant outside of marriage. That is true. That is a society. So we are not judgmental about that. What we told the parents and what we told the villagers when they came and were trying to accuse us of trying to be anti-Islam, we said that we have no judgment. What we wanted to do is that we wanted to ensure that Hajara has got to adalci. Adalci is something akin to justice. So if we speak their language that they understand, we are likely going to win them over to us. And so that's some of the things that we did with the understanding their core values and respecting it. I had this morning about women, so I'm talking about men and women. It's International Women's Day. Some of the dynamics that we had to face. We have a syndrome called the PhD syndrome. Who knows what is PhD? Anybody have idea what is a PhD syndrome? Yeah? Good job. Pull her down. No, we are not for it. And I had it expressed very well this afternoon. I think one of the things that bothers some of us women we know it, is this ability to scale over being pettiness, just being petty about issues. And if we're able to be more, pull her up, then we'll get there. And how do we do it? Somebody was asking, how do you lift somebody up? It's when you don't see yourself as a competitor. You are not competing. You are cooperating. So I call it co-opetition, not competition. When we cooperate, we are stronger. I'm stronger to take her to put her on my shoulder, talking about mentorship. And for her to take another person and put her, that is how we shine. We are not a lone star. Because men have the, you know it, have the power, they have the resources. In some of the society, they have the land. They have the political, how to manipulate a lot of things. But for us as women, it's the ability to cooperate. And I believe that maybe in Q&A we can explore the possibility of how more we can cooperate. But this is something I have found in my work, that the pull her down syndrome could be a way of slowing our progress. Gossip, backbiting, slow it down is not necessary. We can move on without all that. We engage. And I will speak about engagement maybe when I talk about how I work with the Islamic fundamentalists. Now, I want to say something about action. What do we do differently? Some of you that have followed this International Women's Day celebration, from the community-based organization in the villages to the United Nations, there has been common theme: girl-child education, discrimination, identity, violence, human rights, early marriage, and more. And I think that within this context, we can find, and I want you to, I know you are doing so much, but if there's something I want to leave this afternoon, is for you to remember that each of us have a responsibility to do a little bit more. So as we celebrate this International Women's Day, let's do a little more than we have done. Write it down. Don't only say, they say talk is cheap. Put down how many people do you want to mentor, on top of how many you have been mentoring. How many more do you want to take on board? How many more do you want to guide to a better path? How many do you want to live a life so that they can learn from your own life? How many? We can take personal action, we can take collective actions, and I believe that we have it in us to do it. And I'll give you my last two stories, and I'll shut up because I'm looking at the time. In 2002, I was doing the case of Amina, and I'm bringing everything I've said about strategy into this part of the story. I was defending Amina Lawal, the woman that was sentenced to die by stoning, on 2-count charge. Now, she committed adultery. She was pregnant, she has no husband, and she confesses. So that was 2 charges. She has confessed to adultery. If you look at the trial court record, it doesn't really square up so well. So a BBC reporter stopped me and asked me, what do you think about stoning? Is stoning in the Quran? It's a simple question. And my answer was that I do not think stoning is in the Quran. That was my answer. Now remember, I speak Hausa, which is the language of the northern Nigeria, and Hausa is broadcast in the western region of Nigeria, so it caught about 16 countries. So BBC in London is broadcast in Hausa. And so I had a lot of feedback, a lot of very strong condemnation that I was anti-Islam and I was anti-Sharia. It's not a comfortable place to be. Remember I said if you are anti-Islam, that is apostasy. That is death itself. So it's not a comfortable place to be. So I called the reporter and I said to him, I want to visit with the mullahs that he interviewed that condemned me. And he said, you don't want to do that, do you? And I said to him, I really want to because I was now beginning to hide and I cannot be effective during my case. So when I insisted, he said, I will introduce you, but I will not be responsible for you. And he was very kind, but the mullahs were more generous. They accepted me to visit with them. And the visit was supposed to be in a mosque. They were all in a mosque, all of them. 8 of them, I went to meet them there. The mosque could take comfortably 5,000 people, a huge mosque in Abuja. They were sitting at the end of the mosque when I came in 8 chairs, there are 8 of them. And halfway through the room, the mosque, there was one chair. I saw the chair, but I didn't go toward the chair. I walked toward the mullahs. While I was approaching the mullahs, I decided to kneel down, getting close to them, and to sit on the floor. And they echoed at the same time, stand up, go and sit on that chair, they said to me. Now, in my culture, I'm not allowed to look at the men in their faces. So I was looking on the floor. And I said to them, how can I, your daughter, sit on a chair when you, my fathers, are sitting on a chair? Now, they were quiet for some moment. And they said to me, are you Hawa Ibrahim? Still looking at the floor, I said, as you please, I am. Are you the lawyer? As you please, I am. Oh, you have not forgotten about your religious teaching, they asked me. I said, You have not forgotten about your culture. I said, no. But remember, I went to the mosque because I granted an interview on the radio. I did not say a word about the interview I granted on the radio. I told them I'm a foolish lawyer. I told them I'm a silly lawyer. I told them I'm out there trying to help those women and children being condemned to stone by death and their limbs to be amputated for the children for stealing. And I'm not sure I'm getting it right. And I came to them because I needed their wisdom. And I came to them because I needed them to guide me with their knowledge of what to do. At that moment, I had 47 cases. I have made photocopies, and I brought it with me to the mosque. They listened to me. These are men and mullahs that we have been trying to see months. They will not want to see us because we are like infidel. They listen. They engage me. 3 things I have learned from that experience. And before I say that, let me tell you this, that they didn't only listen. After we finished the advice, they said something, but they told me that the Quran I came with was a smaller Quran, and they gave me a big one they printed. They couldn't read or write. But let me tell you what they said to me before I left. They said, we will not publicly support what you are doing, but we'll also publicly not deny you. That was the most powerful thing they could have given me for me to continue the cases. And subsequently, all the other cases I have done from the 47 to where I am now, I attribute it to the fact that they didn't publicly oppose what I was doing. And like I said, the three things I have learned, and I don't know for some of the questions that was asked this afternoon, is humility. It takes nothing out of us. We can be the smartest people in town, but we can lose it if we cannot come to that level of realizing what we can do good, depending on the context where we are working, whether that could add value to us. For me, I understood that was where I was born and bred. I knew they were my fathers. It's not about religion. It's not about my culture. It's not about Islam. It's about Sharia. It's my culture. My father will not sit on a chair for me to sit on a chair. It's never done. So how do you understand the dynamic and work within the dynamic? What is your situation? What is your dynamic? And how do you work within your own dynamics? That is how I have learned to work within mine, to be humble. The second thing I have learned is they are not the monsters that we think they are. No, they are not. I work in Afghanistan. I've met some of the Taliban and the Mujahideen. They are not. They are human. They like the same thing we want. They want to go to bed and close their eyes and sleep. They want their children to go to school. They want the pursuit of happiness. They just look at it from a different direction sometimes. But they just like exactly what we want. But if we understand this dynamic, then we can engage. The helicopter can do, the Apaches can do something, the AK-47 can, but there's something more powerful. Understanding the dignity that exists in each of us. Not the other. As we celebrate this Women's Day, if I can remind you and score something, the other is always slowing us down. The other is us. And the last thing I have learned in this engagement is that there is place for everybody. The field is so wide. Everybody has a space. Somebody was saying geography, somebody was saying anthropology. We all have something to contribute on the table. Actually, the good books say each of us have a place on the table too. So as we celebrate this International Women's Day, let's remember that there is something more powerful. Not the color of our skin, not our sex or sexual orientation, neither is it our privileges. But there's something more powerful than that, not anything. The most powerful thing I'll tell you today is the dignity in each of us. Is the worth of a human being that each of us has. That is more powerful. And if we carry it, we are much more better as we celebrate today and we continue. I want to tell you my last story, which is my celebration of Women's Day. Now, I went to Nigeria about 4 weeks, end of January. I came back in February. I want to move here, but I know I'm being recorded because I wanted to demonstrate something. I will do as much as we could. So, okay, I was in Nigeria, and I was in the north. And I was thinking that this is the month of March approaching, and I want to do something a little different. Remember my story at the beginning? I was a hawker. I went to the mountain to take woods. Okay. So my colleagues, my classmates in the elementary school, and we call it primary school, some of them have 10 children, some of them have 15 children, some of them are really old. But they still go to the farm. I'm the only person in my class that have gone to college. When I go home, I don't dress like this. I dress like this because I'm coming to visit with you. So I dress like a villager. And it's very important to identify with our people. So I dress like a villager. I don't put the same shoe. I put slippers. Some of their slippers are the flip-flop. They are not the same. One is a different color, this is a different color. So I got that one from my mother, different color, just to make sure I sort of blend. And I said, oh, you are going to the mountain tomorrow. I also want to join you. They said, we leave at 5 a.m. I said, that is what we did when we were small. Immediately after the prayer, the call to prayer that we pray in the morning, we go to the mountain to get the woods. I will do it. They say, you can't. Now, in the meantime, I drove myself to my village, and I had in Nigeria a Plymouth. A Plymouth is, some of you that know it, is a little bit, is this SUV. In my village, there is no vehicles. So my Plymouth for them was an aeroplane. Okay? So I parked my car in front of my house. This is just a few weeks ago. And I joined them to go to the mountain. They say, you can. I said, I can do it. I went, it's about a 1 hour walk to the mountain and maybe 1.5 hours coming back because we have to take it slow. And so we got our wood, put it on our head. And you know, when we put our head on our head up to today, you can walk with it without holding it. It's just part of it, just fun. So we had our wood, came down the hill, and small children in the village saw me coming down. And they rushed, and I said, why should you take it from me? Because you remove the pleasure of, and they welcome you from the farm, they welcome you from bringing this heavy thing. And why will I get my own welcome? So don't take it from me. So we all went home. In the meantime, the village head was informed that the lawyer, they call me barrister, the barrister had come and had gone to the village, the mountain. And he was waiting, and he stood somewhere and watched when we came back. So immediately I didn't do it much because of any attention. It was just a prompt of the moment, it's my intuition. And I'll speak to you there because I'm also speaking to our intuitions. So we went home, got ourselves ready, and in the meantime, the village head decided that the village council should meet. Because if you know the problem we have in the northern Nigeria, some of you that have read a bit about it, is Boko Haram. Boko Haram is one of like the Al-Qaeda we have now in the north. And we have a lot of young men in my village that will sit from morning. We have a huge load of unemployment. One of the statistics says we have 75% unemployment. Okay? This is not a recipe for good. So these young women are sitting under the tree from morning till night. So they are easy recruits. Do you get that? They are easy recruit for anybody that wants to do anything because they have nothing to do. So the village head called a council meeting. And he said to them that, you know, it's a long tradition of greetings. You have to greet from the chicken to everybody. After all the long greetings, he said to them, there is something that happened in this village today. That was in the evening. That barrister that brought the aeroplane left her aeroplane, took her leg and went to the mountain to get some wood, and came down from the mountain. And this young man you see under the trees, sitting down, a couple of hundreds of them, have no chain of a bicycle. That's how he described it. No even a needle of a bicycle. He said, we cannot take it anymore. That we have to decide today in this village what we want to do. If this woman will do it, remember the women are always different, you know, in our culture. If the woman will do it, then the young men have no business sitting under the tree. So they have to decide something. This was in February. In March, the gift they gave me for the Women's Day was that they have decided how we could now engage with the young men to get them work. I don't know what is your dynamic. I don't know what situation you find yourself. I don't know what your intuition is. Don't deny it. It may be as irrelevant as it comes to you. Don't deny it. If something is there, your situation is completely different from mine. You can interpret my own from your own angle. Don't deny it. And know that you are the most important person that can change the world. And as we celebrate this Women's Day, there is power in each of us. We can do one good one day. You can be one person on one issue, one time. And that is why the world is a better place for us. And we want to give it more to others. And let me say finally that our target may be different. But our values, our core values are the same. Thank you very much. Please ask any question. There is no restriction, no silly question, just ask.
were supposed to get married to someone at the age of 12. What was it like?
I know that they are recording it. Maybe they want to take you on the mic.
What was it like breaking that stereotype and not getting married and deciding to get an education, even though that's not something a girl would normally do?
It wasn't easy. When I went to law school, which was my last, some of you, I don't know, is there a Nigerian here? Anybody from Nigeria here? Okay. In Nigeria, we have a law school, which is then it's only in Lagos. And if you graduate from law school, it's a huge celebration, big celebration. And when I graduated, there was no member of my family that was there. And this is because I have done too much, and they don't want to identify with me. So it was one of the most painful moments that I had. But to your point is that how did I break through? 3 things happened when I was growing up. My mother, a newspaper, and my society. My mother, remember we are all hawking and buying and selling. She always says something like, oh, she wishes she's not in this village. If she's only a little educated, she will not be in this village, then we will not be hawking, then we will maybe get better education. So she always laments, you know? And so that sort of rested with me. In a way, I didn't want to be like my mother in that aspect. And my mother is the most wonderful human being. She's still around. Then I went to the village square one day to buy, for some of you that have visited some African villages, we have village squares. So they sell things in the morning, then you go and pick it and buy it. So they are frying beans. We call it ose. So they are frying these beans, and I bought the fried beans. And they wrap it for me in a newspaper. And after I finished eating it, I was looking at the paper, and there was a picture of a person. At that time, I don't know what it meant, but the person has a 4-square hat and a gown. But that was not my interest. My interest was the confidence the person had. And I kept looking at the picture, and I said, I want to be as confident as this picture. So I just wanted to be that confident with that, like this picture. I must have kept it forever. I don't know where it was coming from, but it was a huge inspiration. Later in life, it served me well. And let me say this for the sake of the student in this place. My second name became library in the university because I didn't learn English in the elementary school. I went to teacher school, I didn't learn English. So my first English was in the university. And my best friend was the library. And I don't know how many of you are struggling with anything. My struggle was English. And I knew where I would find the answer. The answer is not going to parties. The answer is not following friends that have no business being my friends. The answer is for me when they open the library in the morning, I'll be the first person to jump in. When they close it at 9, they have to chase me out of the library. That was my answer, because I have to read what the teacher says 3-4 times for me to understand what was happening. And when I say friends could be a burden, a baggage that you don't need for some of the students, I mean it. This is me standing here before you. If I could get somewhere, you can get even much more better because you have more opportunities. So that was the second thing, the newspaper. And my society, even though I was the first girl to go to college from my village, they didn't stop me, but they didn't encourage me. And that is why today, my strength is to give voice to the voiceless, help to get power to the powerless. Where I can, and I'm supporting literacy, to ensure that the illiteracy in my society is decreased. In the North, it's much higher. If you see 10 Nigerians in the United States, 9.5 will come from the South. In the North, you don't have many, and I come from the North. So how can I improve on literacy? And the last one is how can I improve on this issue of poverty? So I have 4 goals: power to the powerless, voice to the voiceless, helping the poor and the illiterate. So that is actually my passion. And I don't do it because I needed anybody's money. I don't need nobody's dime. But somehow, without anybody's paying me, I still moved on. And I think that is a blessing. If you sow, you reap. You know that? You sow, you reap. It's true. If you sow orange, you reap orange. You don't reap apple. If you sow good, you will reap good. And I'm a living example. If you sow good, you reap good. I mean, I couldn't have come to Harvard even to clean somebody's shoe. Come on. And I came to teach. So good, you will reap good. Remember that. So good, you will reap it. It may not be the amount of wealth you amass. Maybe not. Maybe it will just come to you in very good health. You are healthy. Maybe it comes to you in a different way. It has come back to me. I have never taken a dime from 57 cases I have handled, not a dime. I never lagged. This is my own dynamic. I'm not saying it applies to everybody, but I just want to share the principle that in sowing there is reaping. And it's what you sow that you reap.
Maybe 30 years ago, the development economist Polly Hill wrote about the hidden trade in Hausaland and the women who were able to make money by selling from behind the walls of the compound, even though they were in seclusion. And the little girls, like yourself perhaps, when you were a child, were the ones who were the runners between compounds selling prepared food, for example. Now the girls are going to school. What's happening with that? Because I know that, I mean, this was even before Sharia was imposed, for example, in Kano State. And yet women were in seclusion. So who are they still able to sell, and by what means?
It's contextual. If you go to my village, we still have people that hawk up to today. When you come to the city, you don't have them. You don't have people of my generation, or no, people that are older than my generation that have moved on, have been educated, did not want their children to hawk. Right. So I came, for example, I came to the United States to spend 1 year at Radcliffe, but this is my 5th year in the United States. Why am I staying? U.S. don't need me. You don't need me at all. My people need me. But I'm investing in my children. Unfortunately, I have to change my priority to say, so people of my generation or older are investing more in their children, so you don't have the children hawking. But what has happened further is that the ability to challenge the status quo in a very respectful manner. The children are educated. Some of them go back and look down on the older people in the village or in their own society. In my society, that is not it's not good at all. Wisdom does not reside in your education or how many PhD you have amassed. It doesn't reside in that. So for us, we still respect our older people, and what is hurting some of our educated ones that we've also tried to bring into the fold is the balance. The balance to say, yes, we have education, but yes, the education has helped us more to understand our culture and to respect more, but to change the status quo of the woman. You educate a girl, you educate the society or the house. So if we come in a way that we can help improve the status quo, both economically and otherwise, I think we are better off for it. So it's happening in some society it's not as much. Is it an answer to your question?
I'm wondering what's happening to the occupational pursuits of the mothers. If the children are now all going to school and the women can't leave the compound, and so where they were able actually to, let's say, prepare food, or where they're selling jewelry or whatever it was, and they had the children, now they don't because the children are going to school. What has happened to the pursuits of these women, many of whom were not literate?
Nothing has happened as much. Let me give you the example in my house. Even though I went to school, I still go back after. Most of our schools are in our villages. We go back to help our parents and to work inside the house, help them with the cooking, help them with everything. Now, when I left my village, my mother took her own sister's children. And so in every family, it's a village. It's a big family. And everybody comes to support each other. So there are very few women in my village or surrounding places that are still having challenges, having their children left In my village, maybe 20, 30% have left, but we always come back. Most of us still come back. So there is not much happening with the parent, the female parent. We age, and responsibility decreases. And we do have community-based organization in some of the societies. And a lot of the women that have something common to do, which is what the women gather to do. It could be extracting oil from groundnut or making local bouillon. They always have their groups. They are always there. It's a community. So not so much have changed as in terms of their status as women. Not so much have changed. But to have the girl's child to go to education, I think has improved them, because when they come back with a bit of resources, they can buy food for the family and they can change some few things. So yeah, it's happening in a different way. I will take 3 questions, otherwise I'll keep answering one question and a very long answer. So I'll take 3 at the same time so that I get people to speak.
Is it? Thank you so much for that. That was so inspirational. I really enjoyed your talk. One thing that spoke to me is this space of withdrawal, that a lot of action that you were able to do was because of seeming lack of action on somebody else's behalf. That actually village decided not to act, that mullahs decided not to act, that there was certain kind of active withdrawal from action that would allow you to navigate the space. And I just wondered if this is some kind of cultural logic and practice that's emerging in this very difficult field where so many things have to be negotiated, that this active withdrawal is actually enabling action and success and certain kind. If you can just flesh out a little bit this space of silence of a sort that's so enabling and not disabling. Thank you.
It's a wonderful question. Let me take 2 more. I saw a hand. Anne? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Madam Ibrahim. I just want to ask more about women and young girls going to school and the actions of Boko Haram and how they tend to terrorize certain populations from attending school, getting the education they deserve, and advancing more into life. So I would just like to learn a little more about that from your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the last one, then I'll take another set.
I think you know my question. I would love to hear your story on how you went from hawking and into school and how that happened.
Actually, I'm writing a chapter in my second book, and it's called From Hina, which is my village, to Harvard. So that's a very good question. Let me start with the question that you asked about active withdrawal or silence. You know, it's a very thoughtful question. It's a very deep question. Were they actively withdrawn? I don't think so. Now you have to look at each story from its own lens. Okay? I was reading somewhere that northern women are not powerful. It's not true. That the Muslim women are not powerful. It may not be true. I'll tell you why. My grandmother is the most powerful person in the house. I grew up with my grandfather. You know, she has her barn of food. Okay, she has a barn where she keeps her store. She farm. My grandfather farm. In Islam, within our own culture, the husband supplies all the need of the family. So before the month ends, because he has other wife, he will be scratching his head because he doesn't have food. Now, the women call him father. They call him Baba. Okay, my grandfather. And he calls the woman, his wife, her name is Hani. That's her real name, Zuma. He called her Zuma. But when it comes to the end of the month, about the end of where he really doesn't have much because he was a security guard, he was scratching his head. He would lower his voice. Zuma, Zuma, When he started doing like that, he's looking for something from her barn. And they will always say, oh, Baba is this, Baba is that. But the power in the house is the woman. And I will speak to this power of the woman in the Boko Haram case. And this is my own theory, and I'm writing a little bit about this Boko Haram issue. And this may be a bit controversial for some of you hearing me. I think we need to be a little bit more mothers in my society. She knows her son. I have 2 boys. My older son is a champion now. He's the Massachusetts #1. I mean, he's a champion of wrestling. I don't know why he chose wrestling, but he just became the wrestling of the year. He's in Boston Globe. We came here without nothing. Okay? I kept telling them what my mother told me. Education is the future. You have to believe in yourself. That was my mother's lessons to me. Now, some of us are so busy in our work, which is also okay, that I think we are losing that touch with our children in my society. Now, if my son will be having fever tomorrow, I'm likely to see it in his eyes today, because I'm very close with him. And I think one of the solutions of Boko Haram will go back to us as mothers. We didn't give birth to children to be killers. We didn't give birth to children to be wayward. So it's our involvement of knowing our children a little bit more and using, like the chicken will do, gather her children under her wings. Some of us, I mean, this is a different culture, so I'm speaking Greek here, so forgive me. In some of our cultures, for us, it's very important that some of these children are under our wings. Not in a negative way, in a positive way. And I think, and I have a lot of story in my country where they killed the Boko Harams. It may not be the solution. And one of the titles of what I was writing about Boko Haram is, "The Megari Ake Chingari," is Hausa. The Megari Ake Chingari, direct translation is, it takes the person that is within the town for you to win the war in the town. So it takes a Boko Haram to stop Boko Haram. Maybe not the government. Maybe not the Apache helicopters. Maybe not the drones. It takes a Boko Haram to stop Boko Haram. And the mothers will play an active role in that. So back to your question. Trying to get the word, withdrawal or silence. You know, if you look at the context of some of our society, they are not actively silenced or they are not withdrawn. They are not actively withdrawn. That's how society is made. And when I say understand the dynamics, when you go to Bangladesh, the dynamic is completely different from when you come. They are Muslims. Different from where I come from. So it's not an activeness in, or their silence per se. It's more, how do we engage them? At what level do we engage them? And remember the power of the womb, the mother's womb. There is power in it. And we need to start using it more creatively for the silence and for the voice. And I always say those people that have voice make noise. Those people that are silent keep silent because it all pays. We balance it. It depends on how you creatively want to use your voice and how I want to use my noise. Does that make sense? It's more philosophical now, but we could talk about it a little bit more. But let me tell you that depending on where you are, what you are doing, your silence could be an added value, and your noise could be an added value. So let us put it contextually. But the most important thing is that we are not passive, that we are doing something. And in some of our society, it's not the silence that gave us what we did. I remember when we discovered that one of the judges that was handling the Sharia case has also impregnated a girl. And that same judge had condemned one of our clients to die by stoning. We found him, we discovered him, we digged a little bit into him, and we found out the girl. So we went to court. We didn't say in court that, you impregnated a woman, you know. We didn't say that. But we say if it was your daughter, if it is your sister, you know, we started bringing inferences into it. But then we discovered that he wasn't listening. And he had other concubines, not his wives. And then we approached one of the girlfriends. That is how he get to hear us. So it depends on your end game. But whatever you do, so good. Do it for good, not for self. Because that could be backfire. It could backfire both ways. I told a story of how we form allies, and that's very important to the question of Boko Haram and to the question you asked me about, Anna, you asked me about my story. Okay, so going back to my story, if I tell you this story is going to be too long, so I'll come back to my story. My village has no any form of civilization. There is no road to my village. There is no electricity. There is no pipe-borne water. But we have everything. I didn't miss anything, in a way. I never have it, so I didn't miss it. So my older sister got married to a city. And the culture is that I would follow my older sister to help her with her settling. And she has electricity, so they had a TV. So that was my first break. So I finished elementary school, and my sister was married, and then So I saw this woman on the TV who was the first female in the state of Bauchi in 1982. And she said one of her main mission, and that is mentorship. Let me underscore mentorship here. She said one of her main mission as a commissioner, the first female commissioner, member of the executive of the state, is that she will help girls go to school. So I said, she was speaking to me. So I went to look for this woman. I went day one. They look at me. I don't look presentable. Nobody will allow me to see. They call her Madame. I won't see Madame. It's likely that my shoe was torn or my wrapper was also not good looking. I wasn't good enough to see Madame. I went the second time. I went 10 times. I went 20 times. I went 30 times. I would not give up. For some of you that think of giving up in this hole today, remember this story. Don't give up. There could be something coming out of not giving up. And that is part of what happened to me. I never gave up. The last time I went, the security man was so upset, and he was banging his table. He said, young girl, you have been coming here, and I told you cannot see Madame. I will allow you to see Madame, but promise me you will never come back here again. Do you understand? And I said, as you please, it's okay. If you allow me to see, I won't come back. And then Madame asked me to come in. She asked me to go in to see Madame. Madame was sitting on a huge, huge, massive table. I've never seen that. And when I entered, and I didn't know whether to sit, whether to lie down on the floor, whether to whatever, I was just totally confused. And she asked me to sit on the chair, and I put the tip of my butt on my side of the chair, and I just couldn't sit. And she said, young girl, what can I do for you? And I quickly grabbed my envelope, and I brought out my Women Teachers College certificate, which has no English. And I said to her, I heard you want to help girls to go to school. This is my result. And she looked at me and she said, I can't help you because you didn't even pass English. And in the college, in the university, they teach in English. And did you say you want to go to university? I said, yes. And she said, no, they teach in English. You cannot be able to make it. And then, remember, I have persisted to see Madame. So I broke down as usual and I started crying. This is one of the things I do very often. When I am in distress, I cry. So I was crying, and she was like, the tears cannot help. You didn't pass. I wanted to help, but you didn't pass, and I cannot help you. So I told her, no, I didn't want to go into the college because I have the result. They have something called remedial. So remedial is you remedy your paper. It's this affirmative action. So it's 1 year. So you can go not as a graduate, but to remedy paper, so remedial. So I said, there's a remedial program at University of Jos, if you can help me get into that. She said, even remedial, they teach in English, and I was not speaking English with her. I was trying to speak in Hausa and picking up a bit of English. She said, you can't cope up. Long and short of story, she said, okay, she wrote something on her business card. This is the first time I saw business card. She put it in an envelope, sealed it, and gave it to me. And then she said, go to University of Jos. The registrar, his name is George Korba. I went to a college with him. I went to a program with him. see if we can help you. So that is how I accidentally went to the university. He had the same reaction. He didn't know that I could, he didn't see me any potential in me that I could be able to cope up. And I told you the story of my library. So that is how it joined in. I did remedial 1 year. And it was time for me to go. It was 1 year. My mother and my father completely, actually my mother said if I walk out of the house, I shouldn't come back. Now my mother is the most amazing human being. But the honor of the family rests on the girl child. And it will finally be on her if anything happened. Anything happen will be if I become pregnant, because we don't know anything about sexual relationships. So if you become pregnant, you bring a huge disgrace to your family. And so that is her fear, and she thought I shouldn't go. And she said, if you walk out of this house, you don't come back. And that will not happen. So I walked out of the house, but the university was a boarding school. So for 1 year, I was in this boarding school. But it's time to go. And long story short, I finished remedial. Everybody wanted to apply to read law. I've never seen a lawyer. I don't know what law could do. I don't know anything about law, but because everybody wanted to read law, I said, why not me too? So that is how I ended up putting law as my first course, political science my second, and management as my third, because we have 3 choices. And I didn't get admitted the first time because I didn't score enough. I didn't get admission the second time. They call it supplementary admission. I didn't get admission. But then they have the sub-supplementary, which was actually the affirmative action. So they are trying to bring girls from my area, which have never been seen school before like that. And so that is how I accidentally entered into a graduate program to read law. And then, of course, you now see my passion to give back. So that is my story, and then it continues. Mary told me that I have to stop in 5 minutes, so I will take the last question. Any burning question? Yes.
Thank you, Hawa, for such an inspiring set of comments. I was just wondering if you could perhaps maybe share with the audience and everyone just a little bit about the cases you worked on, because a lot of the discourse within Islam and Sharia law and feminists who work within Islam is the debate about how do you contest it when it's so badly misinterpreted, in different places. So maybe you can maybe give us an example or two, like how did you use the same passages from the Hadith or the Quran and then interpret? Did you do reinterpretation work, or did you invoke other kinds of universal human rights laws? Like what worked? Because we're still seeing the implementation of a certain reading of Sharia law that's combining with many different practices of cultural norms or patriarchy or whatnot, and it's working against women in really problematic ways.
Excellent question. So I will end up with this, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, Mary, and I will finish. Now, I'll just tell you about my case. I will leave the academic to you to explain. Now, we had this case of Amina that was sentenced to die by stoning. And the 2 count was that she confesses. And now this is how the confession happened in the trial court record, because none of these women had lawyers at the trial, okay? So the judge sat on his own and condemned them to death by stoning because of an alleged confession. So what we did was to appeal some of the cases, and what we got was a trial court record. So I'm telling you from the trial court record, this is what question was to Amina. Amina, you are pregnant. She said, yes. And you have a child, and you are not married. And she said, yes. That was confession. So that was 1 count at which she was charged, that she confesses. And it, for me, sounded like extraction. Now, when you look at the Hadith, and both in the Maliki and the Hanbali school of thinking, there are 4 major schools of thought in Islam, there are a lot of leeways. And when I said that we argue the case within Sharia and got justice in Sharia, I mean it. And I am talking about how do we work within the Sharia. The Sharia has its own mechanism. It has answers to some of these challenges. So one example I'll give you is the example of the sleeping embryo theory. Did anybody hear me speak about that? Anybody heard me? Okay. The sleeping embryo theory is a theory that we got from Maliki. Now, we didn't make this up. It may not sound scientific, but that is what the school of thought of Maliki said. A woman can be pregnant for a minimum of 6 months. And she can be also pregnant for a maximum, depending on what we are reading, of 5 years. Okay? That is what Maliki said. We didn't make, and our laws are curved under the Maliki school of thinking. So we brought the Maliki. We didn't bring Hanbali. We didn't bring Shafi'i. We brought Maliki. And we argued that Amina was married and divorced 11 months before she had the baby. So the product, that baby, could have been a sleeping embryo within the theory of 5 years of her former husband. Not scientific, but it was upheld. And name it, you'll find it in the Sharia. The Sharia is vast and dense law, and I am telling you, a lot of what we hear in the media may not be accurate. And I'll tell you this last example about amputation of teeth. Now, there are a lot of hadiths. By the way, there is no stoning to death in the Quran. If anybody has seen it, I need to, there is no stoning to death in the Quran. In my research in the Bible, I came across 39 instances of stoning to death, including the New Testament. Did you know that there is decapitation in the Bible? Do you know there is amputation in the Bible? I'm not comparing, I'm just telling you. But in my own research, I have not seen stoning in the Quran. It's very important for me to stress this. So some of this hadith that people are quoting, and I'm gladly going to give you a copy of my book so that you can answer some of the questions. I sort of pull on hadith of all the 4 major schools of thought and argue that today you cannot have an offense in Islam or under Sharia called zina and stone the woman to death for multiple reasons, one of which is that for a judge to sit in judgment of a woman that has committed adultery, he himself must be pure. He himself must be like a saint. You remember in the good book in the Bible, when they brought the woman, and the good Lord said, let the one that have no sin take the first stone and stone her. That is something similar in the Quran, in the Hadith. So, you cannot sit in judgment today if you are not a saint. That if you have a law like this, it ridicules Islam. It ridicules. So, to an extent, there is something that we need to dig deep. And I had a lot of discussion with some states are saying we cannot have Sharia in the United States. So this is all sort of intellectual discuss, because our Constitution is so clear that some of this discussion are a little bit detraction. And we cannot draw parallel about certain incidences and try to make a big whole out of it. I think you have a wonderful Constitution, and Sharia has its own dynamics, and it may not apply it may not apply within, depending on your context. And it could work in some context. Now, if you remove Sharia from my village, they have no law to go to. If you remove Sharia today in my village, they have no place to adjudicate. It may not apply in somewhere here, Utah, wherever. Okay, finally. Now, I want to tell you a story. Some people have asked me, okay, why do you do what you do if you are not paid? And I want to close with that. And thus I'll tell you a story from the good book. So there is this prophet that was praying for Israel. His name is Elijah. And Elijah was praying for a certain thing. And one time, after he prayed and prayed and prayed, and there was fire and brimstone, and he was so happy that God was in this fire, is going to answer his prayers. And the fire and the brimstone passed. God was not in the fire. Then he kept praying. I was earthquake. So God is here. He's going to answer me right now in this earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake either. He prayed more. But the good book ended by saying, peace, be still. And in the quietness of his heart, when he sought God's face in the quietness of his heart, I'm coming back to silence to end up, he had God speak. So I don't know who speaks to you, what you believe in. I don't want to impose my ideas anywhere. But when the entire world is racking up with what we now know as Putin trying to become something else, and women are always the victim of some of these things, and as also celebrate International Women's Day. There are a lot of things that are detraction. There are a lot of things that looks very impossible. What is happening? We have made some gains, but we have a lot of gaps. Remember that in the silence of our heart, peace be still. Peace be still. And there will be an answer. Thank you.
Please come up and greet her and meet her, and I'll meet you in the Strasser Commons. Thanks, everybody, for coming.